Hello, everybody, and Ingrid, who is muted and hiding behind her little black box. This is Pam from Around the Table Yarns, and this is the third class of creating our Hobbs doll for Amigurumi Club. And some of you may be asking, where's the first and the second class? Well, some of our pages accidentally got deleted, so I'm in the process of putting those back up. But this is the little Hobbs we're making. And today we're going to talk about the finishing touches and putting them together. So this actually shouldn't take very long, but we'll go through the pieces. And I'm going to hold up the pieces first before I switch to the camera so you can see everything. So at this point, here are the pieces you should have. You should have a body stuffed. You should have a belly band, which is going to go here on his body. And I have a little tip about the belly band. You should have a head stuffed. You should have 2 ears. I'll talk about the felt pieces in just a minute. You should have a muzzle, not stuffed. You should have 2 arms and 2 legs, which are identical, except that the arms have an extra row of black on them. So they're just a little bit longer. Okay. As far as the stuffing goes, I want to talk about that for a second. So I wanted Hobbs to be fairly squishable. So I did not overstuff him or make him particularly stiff. I put enough stuffing in so that his body would hold shape, okay, for the body. The head, the same thing. I just kind of worked with the shape and I put enough in so that it would hold the shape. The arms and the legs. Oh, I don't have his tail. Fred, I still have to, I have left his tail at home. That wasn't in my bag. So he has a tail as well. You can stuff it, but don't fill it up. Hopefully you can see that. Because we want, and I actually may even take out a little bit. I'm going to show you how I pin them on, and I may take out some of the stuffing. If you don't fill it up to the top or fill it lightly here at this part, then he has flexible, quote unquote, joints at this part. So I made him relatively soft. There's not a lot of stuffing in here, and even less up here at the top where it's going to get joined. And that goes for all of the arms and the legs, as well as the tail, which I don't have to show you. So, all right. So you have all of your pieces. The last things that you need, other than the pieces that you have crocheted, the pattern has you using some black felt to create a nose, which will get stitched onto his muzzle. And I just got and I had at home because, you know, I'm crafting fool. If you don't have black felt, if you have any black fabric, you could even crochet a little shape if you wanted to. But I just used a piece of black felt. I think it's 35 cents at Michael's or Joann's, something like that. It's not even the nice felt. It's kind of the crappy polyester felt because it doesn't really matter for this. You need to cut out 2 rectangles, which are going to be the stripes that go across the top of his head. All right, like this. And you can decide how long they are. I decided I liked this length. Okay, and I'll show you under the camera in a minute. And then you also need to cut a triangle for his nose. Sorry, that's going to get stitched to his muzzle. The pattern has you also cutting out eyes. Terrible at cutting a circle. So I actually found a button that was flat. It has a shank on the back that we carry here in the shop. I didn't like the size of the safety eye we had. It was a little too small, I felt, for Hobbs. And this turned out to be the perfect size. So I'm not giving this to anybody, so I feel comfortable putting a button on this. If it was for a little kid, you could either crochet, you could embroider, or you could maybe trace a dime on your felt and then trim it to the size that you want, and then you could stitch it on. So that's what you need the black felt for. And you really just need just a little, maybe 4x4 square would be plenty, okay? So those are the pieces that we're going to assemble today. And I'm just going to kind of work through the pattern and show you a couple of tricks that I found that have helped. So let's switch to our camera. And let's make that bigger. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start first with this belly band. I'm actually going to move my white paper for just a second. So when I followed the directions for the belly band, making the oval, I found that as you start with a chain here down the center and then you crochet into each side of the chain, and I ended up with a little bit of holes, with holes down the center. And then when I went to lay it on top, I kind of didn't like the holes, okay? So what I did is I took a darning needle and a piece of the white, oh, too bright. Let's leave exposure down, sorry about that. There we go, much better, okay. And I just kind of started where that first hole was. And you can see much fewer, a lot less openings. And I'm just going across where that first chain would have been. And if I'd had some cream colored felt, I would have just stuck it behind here, but I didn't have any cream color. But that would have been another option, because this is going to get stitched on. But I'm just running some yarn back and forth so that you don't see the holes. So you can see how that already looks better. And I may add a little bit more up here. Okay. So you may not have had that trouble, but anytime I crochet into both sides of a chain, I end up getting a little bit of a division of the yarn. And often you do this when it's on like the bottom of the bag, and I don't particularly care, but here it was going to be kind of front and center. And I didn't really like those holes showing. And I spent a lot of time on Hobbs, and I feel like that looks a lot better. Okay. So that's one thing you can do there. All right. So if you are going to use safety eyes for your Hobbs instead of just finding the partner pattern here, you do need to put the safety eyes on before you stuff the head so that you can pop those in. Just pulling up my 2 pages here. Okay. So in her direction, she talks about, so you would put the safety eyes, and then she gives recommendations on where to put the safety eyes. Here's another thing I didn't like is, I don't know where I want this. The eyes are like so much a part of his expression. I kind of want to put the eyes on last. I want to do the muzzle and the nose and then make the eyes match instead of trying to make all those other things match. So if you do want to use safety eyes, you could do the other piece and then pull out the stuffing and put the safety eyes on where you want them and then restuff it. But it really does need to be stuffed in order to put the muzzle and everything on. I'm going to move this up just up here. There we go. Okay. So let's go back here. The directions say stuff the body and sew on the belly band. So here's how that's going to go. I like to, anytime I'm putting anything together, instead of just willy-nilly sewing, and I might even think that my belly band, it maybe is too big. I don't know. But here's how I'm going to find out. I am going to use some pins, some stitch markers, whatever you've got lying around. I'm just going to use some T-pins here. And I'm going to pin everything in place first before I sew, because I might want to change things around once I get all the pieces on. Just don't hurt yourself. And so much of Hobbs is his personality. You could even pull up, you could Google the image and kind of look at his expression if you wanted to. All right, so belly band, I'm just pinning that in place. Let's do legs next. And the legs really come kind of right down here at the bottom. And I do feel like I've got a little too much stuff. As I want it to be, I may even want him to sit, in which case I would want this to be very flexible here. And if there's too much stuffing, when you stitch it on, it won't be flexible. So push some of that down. And let's see. I need some stitch markers for this. I think I might hold it a little better. I'm going to kind of line it up the top right underneath the last black stripe, so that the orange will be attaching to orange right there. So this I'm just kind of doing for placement. And then I've kind of got my center here. I don't really want to cross the center because I got to put the other leg in. And let's see how we like that. And then once I get these in place, I'll show you how to do one limb, because I do a lot more pins. But this is just for placement here. Do the other one like that. Don't get your arms and your legs mixed up. Remember, the legs stop with an orange stripe. So let's start there in the center. This doesn't have to be exact, but just roughly where you want them and kind of what angle you have them at. And stick to the orange. Don't have it come up so that it crosses that black stripe. Your Hobbs will look more natural that way. So that's pretty good. All right, now let's come down here for some arms. I'm gonna do the same thing with the arms. I think I took out, you can see I don't even have the stuffing going all the way to the top at all, because I do want to be a little bit on the floppy side. And fairly close to the shoulder for his arms. Now, what's nice is if you don't have any, there we go. If you don't have too much stuffing here, you can manipulate this a little bit and sew it at more of an angle instead of just straight out. You can kind of tuck this other stripe in if you want it to hang down a little bit more like that, and it'll still move. But I'm just going to get it the pin to the top here, and then I can get them pinned in place in the shape I want them. Then I'm going to go black stripe. It finishes with a black stripe. I'm going to attach it to a black stripe at the top. I'm just going to leave it there for now. I'm going to do the other one here. Let's turn this way. And next stripe, next stripe. So I'm going to switch off the camera for just a second so I can hold them up. All right, so here's kind of what we have at this point. I just have one, but by getting them pinned in place, and then she even recommends like getting everything pinned in place, backing up, and then taking a picture of it. Because sometimes seeing it not right in front of you like that can really help you decide if you like the placements of things or if things look out of place. Like I really don't want his arm sticking straight out. So I'm going to do a little angling as I sew it on because I'd like his arms to hang down a little bit more like that. Okay. There's plenty of flex here. Hi, I'm sorry, we're closed. Yeah, we close at 5. Okay. Beautiful. Thank you. I forgot to lock the door. So you can still bend that way since I didn't put so much stuff in. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that pinned and we're going to go back to the camera and work on the head for just a second. I'm not so sure. I'm going to get the head on first before I decide this is where I want the belly band to go. And if you'll pardon me 1 second, I'm going to lock the door so we don't have more people wandering in. Ingrid is laughing in her living room right now. Okay, hold on, I'm going to pause the record. Hi, welcome back. Okay, here we go. We're going to switch over to the head. Sure. All right. So we've got our little Hobbs head. I started by pinning on the ears where I thought they might go. I may change them. I just use some stitch markers. And then these felt strips, I just have them going across the top of his head. You know, the front is all orange, his stripes go along the back. You could make them longer. It's totally up to you. But I just wanted them to be a little bit visible. Okay. So I've pinned one on, the other I haven't because I haven't quite decided about how close I want those. And then the muzzle. All right, so here's the muzzle. So we're going to attach everything to the muzzle first and then attach the muzzle to his face, because then we can add a little bit of stuffing between the head and the muzzle if we want to kind of poof it out a little bit. But first, it would be easier, I think, to get this part stitched on. I'm just going to pin it on at this point, because who knows what's going to happen next. Someone else is going to walk in. It's been one of those days. But I do like his nose up a little higher on the muzzle. And I played with the shape of the triangle a fair amount. And then to sew it on, you could use yarn. I'm going to use, of course, I forgot my black embroidery thread, but I have black fingering weight cotton, which I think will work just fine. And then the mouth part gets embroidered from there. So since you could go all the way through this, you don't have to stitch right up on top because we're not going to stuff inside the muzzle. We would stuff behind it. So I'm just going to come up through the nose. And then come all the way through. And then I'm just going to make a couple of stitches. I'm going to leave a long tail because I may want to change his expression. And I can always pull this out. But I'm just following kind of what she has in the pattern. You know, and doesn't have to be perfect, but just a little bit of a a mark there, and I may make it longer. I'm just going to take my needle out. Only there. And I'm gonna position it. Oh my God, that's so stinking cute. And really you can position it anywhere you want. I'm gonna start there and see how I like it. I do think it will be easier to stitch the head to the body if everything else is already attached. So if all of your accoutrements are attached to the face first, and then you can stitch the head to the body. So you want to put a little stuffing behind this little muzzle. And maybe not much, but a little bit. And if I turn it sideways, all it does is it just gives, and maybe just closer where his nose is, just to give it a little dimension. This is where you can really personalize it. You can be picky or not. You could just sew it on and it will still be fine. But I've been waiting a long time to make this little guy. I really kind of want to make him the best I can. So, all right. So now if I turn him sideways, it's already a double layer of fabric, so it's going to have a little more dimension to it. But I've added just a little bit of stuffing up here kind of behind his nose. I think that'll be really cute. All right. And then his eyes, I do think this button is really going to be about the right size. Oh my God, that's too stinking cute. So you can play with how close you want the eyes to be or not, how high up you want them. That's really cute. It's a little bit harder to pin those on. You could put a little safety pin through the shank, but I'm just going to kind of hold them in place for a second. And what I might do is move his ears forward. And now that I've got the other parts on, I feel like I want his ears to be a little more forward. So I'm going to try one first. And then I'll show you how I actually stitch something. And so that one's very back here. Let's try this one up here. I like that a lot better, having it a little more forward like that. Let's take one off. When it comes to sewing the pieces on, you can certainly use the tails, if you've got long enough tails attached, or you can start with a whole nother piece of yarn. That's up to you. I'm just trying to make it mostly symmetrical here. So I'm actually coming up almost to the front of his face stripes. And let's get out there. So now I'm going to put his eyes. And his eyes are almost, I think, going to be, I'm going to line him up with kind of the tops, the corners of his nose. There's a symmetry to that I like. And I think that is really stinking cute. Like that. And then I think I'll move maybe his head stripe over just a little bit. Okay. And put the other one. Right. Maybe bring it down a little bit too, like that. They're almost like little eyebrows. So maybe I'll line them up just on either side of the eye. So that you can even add at the end after you sew the head on if you want. or after you get the eyes in place, because I feel like that they could go with the eyes. All right, so that's going to be his cute little head. Let me show you how I attach a limb or a tail or a head or any piece. I'll show you how to do the belly band in a second, but how to attach. I'm going to do the leg because I am pretty happy with where the leg is. That it has an opening like this, okay? You have a couple of options. You can sew it with this closed and stitch it and go all the way through so that it's closed. Or you can stitch it with it open like this so that it goes all the way around. I feel like for Hobbs, and I played with this a little bit earlier, because I want him to be able to have some flexibility, I'm going to kind of not go completely closed, but more closed than open. So here's how I do that. I'm going to use straight pins for the, or the T-pins for this. So I wanted it just below because I don't want to sew, I don't want to cover up into a stripe. Although you could, but it's my preference not to. So I'm going to start by pinning. And here's how I decided like what's flat. Here was my mostly invisible join, and I consider that the center back of the leg. Okay. So as I was stuffing it, I was kind of mushing it with this being the front and this being the back. You can do it any way you want. You could put that to the side if you wanted to, because it is completely circular. It doesn't really matter, but that's just what made sense to me. All right. So that's right there. I'm going to take this other one off so I can get around there a little bit easier and show you. Okay. So I'm not going to completely close it up. I'm going to leave it a little bit open. So I won't go through both layers. I'll go through one side and around to the other side, so that he has not a completely flat connection, but not completely circular either. This is all preference, by the way. Some patterns will tell you. This one didn't, but some amigurumi, you do want to sew it on fully open like that because it's a support, and it's a lot more stable and has a lot more structure that way. But Hobbs is supposed to be more cuddly and soft. So you can see it's got it about maybe half an inch open, still moves. Okay. And then because I finished with orange yarn and I'm attaching it to an orange body, I'm going to use orange yarn, throw it on. And for this, you can just use a darning needle. And I did not leave a long enough tail to use my tail there. All right, so I'm just going to cut in length. And I've got him pinned into the place I want him to be. And I think I'll start here in the center. I'm gonna come up on the other side, and I'm going to catch kind of that last row of single crochet that we did. And I'm going to leave a tail. Leave a long enough tail hanging out that you can run it through a darning needle and then bury it into the body later, okay? So when you cut your yarn, make sure you've got plenty to go around so that you can leave yourself a long enough tail. And then I'm going to kind of go pick a spot here, and up underneath a couple of loops. And that underneath the next stitch in the top. I'm going to leave it loose for a second. As soon as you pull it tight, the harder it is to pull it out if you're not happy with it. And maybe I'll skip one. It doesn't have to be every stitch. I'm going to do one more like that. And then I'm going to pull it. This makes me think of like when you do mattress stitch, where you do a bunch of the stitches, you leave it loose, and then you pull it. You can pull from both directions in. And just make sure you're getting a nice, really invisible seam there, okay? And that looks great. So I can take this pin out, I don't need it anymore. And then just continue around. And if you want to make sure you're kind of staying in a line, you can pull that last stitch loose again. And right here. So this is really like a whip stitch. And I'm just being consistent in where I'm putting it into the leg. I'm just going underneath the tops of those last singles, makes it easy. And I'm running kind of along a diagonal here. I don't all of a sudden want to swing it up, so that this pin is helping me keep this in line. So keep the pins in place as long as you can. You get a little, anyway, sometimes your yarn can get caught up on them. Right. Looks like every other works out well here. I'm going to pull out the fast one because I didn't want it to go into the black line, so I'm just kind of lining it up here to make sure I don't pull those stitches. Don't pull it too tight, but pull it so it's secure and there's no extra yarn. And then if you can see here, there's a little bit of an opening, which is what I wanted. And up here. And I'm going to kind of reinforce that corner, or maybe go through there again. Turn the corner here. And let's finish them off. And again, because I'm using the same yarn, my stitches are really just going to disappear. Take my pin out. My diagonal here. I'm heading back towards the center, which is right here. See the little center magic ring we started with. So I've got a little bit of a gap here, which I don't love. Coming around that corner, I probably should have put in a couple more stitches. So exactly what I'm going to do. It's easier to do it instead of going back and reinforcing it. I will tell you that. Adding more yarn just tends to add more bulk. But these stitches are really easy to pull back. So, so around those corners here, we're coming around the bend. I think we need to add, a couple of extra stitches. So maybe don't skip any stitches there. Maybe do every stitch there. There. Here. I'm off camera already. Ingrid, you're supposed to tell me when I'm off camera. There. And then I'm going to go underneath the next one. So here, as I go around this corner here that I've created, I'm going to catch every stitch there so that it doesn't pull itself in, but it stays, holds its shape. Really what I want it to do. And here, and here. Here. So this is how you're going to attach both legs, the arms, and the tail. Let me bundle up this tail. All right, so I've gone around. Let me see how that looks before I go any further. So I'm going to give it a little tug. You don't want to go too far before you tug because your yarn can get caught up. A little loop there I need to go through. There, got it. Oh, much better. Yeah. So you can see it's not pulling in or pushing out the way that it was. All right, now we'll finish. Let's bring it in here. So there you can see it's a much nicer join there. So really make sure you get all of them, and I'll do the same thing on this side. Again, I'm headed for my center here. So I do have to fit the other leg in. That center. I do want to catch every stitch as I'm going. In this corner, I'm going to take this pin out. Let's get our yarn out of pull. And I'm coming up where I started. Here's my tail. I can pull that in. And let's catch these last stitches. So that he stays in good shape. Okay. So let's stand back here and check. And so I can still rearrange a little bit of the bends. He can sit up if I want him to. And that looks good. So then you can, I'm going to give myself a little bit of a knot. So make a loop, come through the loop. You can do that one, maybe twice. You really don't have to do a whole lot. I'm going to do it one more time, kind of back here. Into the loop. And then I'm just going to bury the end by taking the needle and pushing into the stuffing. coming out some other distance away, giving it a tug. And then now only do this if you're sure you like where it is. Then pull, snip, and then the yarn gets sucked back into the body. And then I'll do the same thing with others. If your stitches are very tight, depending on what kind of yarn you're using, if you're on another project, you might have to use a sharp needle to do this. A darning needle might be a little, with a round tip, might be a little dull. So here was the tail I started with. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna create just a little knot, just to secure it. Make a loop, go through the loop, give it a tug, and then push it into the body. You can go as far as you want. Come out the other end. And then pull it, snip it close, and then it should pull back in to the body. And there we've got an appendage attached. Let me stop sharing so I can think of that. So we've got our little, it's very flexible. It will bend. You can see that it's not completely smushed together, although you could do it that way. That would be okay too. But it's got a little bit more circumference that it's attached to, okay? So both legs, both arms, the tail will be attached that way. What's going to be attached differently will be the head. I'm going to show you. So we've got two openings, which we really just kind of want to mirror together. I'm going to do kind of like, so here's where really getting it all together. You can decide if that's where you want his belly band to be, or if you want it a little lower. I might lower it just a hair. But when you do a head, when you do a round opening to a round opening, you definitely want to use stitch markers for this one, or safety pins or something of that kind. And here's how I do that. Let me switch back to the camera. Okay. So you're going to have, I would attach all this other stuff first, but as long as we're talking about attaching. All right, so kind of get them on there. And I'm going to start with 4 pins. And I think about it like a compass, north, south, east, and west. And because all of this will be attached already, you'll make sure that his face isn't off, that it's facing forward. So I'd put one in the front. So that would be my north. I'm going to flip it over. And do my south. And I don't know why Alexa's talking to us. So I'm not worried about this extra stuffing, because I want it to be, I don't want to leave this empty because I don't want his head to flop over. So I'll make sure I'm kind of straight here. I'm going to find the center of my back. Bring it to the center of the back of my head. Make sure that that is still looking straight up and down, as far as not, not twisted. And then put pins for east and west. And then I would go as far as to put a pin in between each one. So a total of 8 pins to hold it in place. And don't take them out until you come to them, because that's what's going to keep the head in place as you stitch around. And if you've got, as the stuffing's kind of coming out, I want that to be solid. I don't want his head to flop. So by having a nice wide open join, it's not going to give it any flexibility. It's going to be rather stiff. And I've got stuffing. I've got the same amount of stuffing right here in the top of the head as I do in the top of the body. Okay. So as you're doing this, if it starts to feel a little soft, feel free to add a little bit more stuffing in as you go. Okay. And then stitch it the same way I just showed you with orange. This would be orange to orange. Be finished with an orange stripe there. And stitch him all the way around, okay? So that's how you do a large circumference to it, or an open circumference to another open circumference. Lots of pins. Don't think you can eyeball it, because as soon as you start to twist it, it just simply doesn't work. Okay. So the belly band is going to get stitched on, and I think I did want to lower it just a little bit based on when I had his head on there. And I still have to finish doing up the back, so I'm just going to lower it just a little, but I'm going to show you how to stitch that on. And this will be the same way that you stitch the muzzle. I'm just going to put a couple pins up here. But I like that better. All right. So for the belly band, I'm going to use the cream colored yarn. So in this case, we're going from one color to a different color. So we have to hide these stitches a little. And this will be the same thing when you do the muzzle. So add some yarn here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these chain stitches, or the tops of the single crochets that go all the way around. Those are going to be where I create my stitches, but I'm going to come up and peel this back a little. And I'm just going to come underneath some yarn that is not going to show, just to secure my end. And I've given myself a long piece of yarn so I can get all the way across. Again, leaving a long tail that I can bury later, okay? So when the belly band goes back, you cannot see where I came up. Okay? Then I'm going to come underneath the chain. Whoop. Pulling all my yarn through. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, Ingrid, maybe you can help me. I don't know. Is this a running stitch? Is that what this is called? If I just come up?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to do a running stitch kind of right underneath the edge of the tops of those single crochets, catching the body yarn underneath. But I don't want any of this white yarn. I don't want to go on the outside of these stitches, because then it'll show. I just want it to disappear. So I'm just going to do a running stitch. It's just going to kind of disappear, but just make sure you're catching enough yarn. So if I pull this away, you can see I've gone underneath several stitches in the back. Go through. And again, you'll do the muzzle the same way. And if you're giving this to somebody, don't do big stitches. Make them about the size of your single crochet, only because it will be easy for it to get caught and pulled away. You want it fairly secure. But when you do this, make sure your belly band is pinned all the way around, because it's really easy for it to shift. So make sure it is securely pinned where you want it to be. And, do a few and stop and make sure it's still lining up the way you want it, that you haven't pulled, one side askew, because that can happen. And the more stitches you have to pull out, the harder it is. Okay, so you're just going to do a running stitch. And just one stitch at a time. And I'm just going just below for the tops of those single crochets. And that just helps me keep a nice even line and keeps the stitches mostly invisible. So the tops of the single crochets are almost a little bit loose, but nothing can get behind them, okay? Don't pull it so hard that it puckers. And take your time. Don't rush through this part. You spent too much time crocheting this little guy. You want to make it cute. All right, so you would continue all the way down. And again, that will also work for the muzzle and the ears as well, when you've got two different colors going. So for the muzzle, you don't have the tops of the single crochet. In this case, start at the bottom because it's a little bit easier to hide, but come up underneath it first. I haven't even cut my yarn here. Alexa thinks I'm asking her something. It's pretty funny. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I have a lot of pins in here. I may even add a couple of more. Don't stick your finger in here and get hurt. So I'm going to pick a row of stitches that I kind of want to follow. I just don't want to zigzag in and out. I just want to try to be consistent. And I'm going to come up the edge. You still have them attached to his belly. Hold on, put some down here. And just pick a line. You're kind of digging in there and securing some yarn. Again, don't go too far, kind of one stitch at a time. The more you get this edge secured down, the more kind of poof you're going to get to his muzzle. And the more shape you're going to get to it. So again, just back and forth, making sure you're catching. So now you're going through 3 layers, because remember, this is double. And then the orange as well. And pull it through. So what that does is it gives you, this needs to be a little longer so I can bury it. So do a few stitches and make sure you like it. And I need to attach all of these things first, but like I don't want that gappy hole there. So that needs to have an extra stitch put in there. So I would pull it back and I would make sure there's another stitch there. Because I don't want it to pull away. I want it to be fairly secure, but I don't want it so tight that it's going to pucker. Like here is good. From here to here is good. It's nice and secure without looking too tight. All right. Poor Hobbs is looking very Frankenstein-y right now. So when all is said and done, and I'm going to finish him up tonight, get everything stitched in place, and I'll post a picture with this video. But you're going to have the cutest little Hobbs. I do like his belly down a little bit lower, I think. I think that's how I like it. So cute. Ingrid, do you have any questions since you're the only one here?
I currently do not have any questions.
Excellent.
I can't wait for the videos to go back up on the website, though.
You and me both. Yes. So that's what also I'll be working on tonight and tomorrow and probably the next day. Just getting all of those sort of things back on. So if you've got any questions, for those of you who are watching this after, we're always here to help. We do have the buttons in stock, and we also have safety eyes. And for those of you who have been working on Hobbs, if you need some black felt and you're local, feel free to come in because I have 2 sheets of it here. I'm happy to give you some. But play with it a little. and make sure you send us a picture when you finish it. Thanks, everybody.